Say hi. In Spanish you say hola. But in my language, street language, we say que bola hacer. Now you are Cuban. Okay, que bola hacer means like what's up, bro? You know what's the matter with you? You know. But anyway, welcome here. It's a pleasure having you in this area. What is this place? This place is the first cultural center of murals and permanent installations inspired by the African-derived religions that we are still practicing here in Cuba. For some scholars incorrectly named Afro-Cubans because they are not African religions in Cuba, they are Cuban religions with African roots. And Salvador Gonzales Escalona was the artist, because he passed away 4 years ago, was the artist who in 1990 committed an act of transgression and transformation of the urban space in order to visualize and legitimize these traditions that, due to the racial and cultural prejudices that we still have here in Cuba, are still regarded as witchcraft, black magic, something negative, but however, it's part of our identity. Remember, Cuba without the black and their descendants would not be Cuba. And Salvador Gonzales, this guy here, he started without permission. If he had asked for permission, they would never have given it to him. But he started in 1990, when it was almost prohibited to paint outdoor without political theme. At the same time, it was 2 years before of the declaration of the free exercise of religion by the government. Remember, in Cuba, my friends, after 1959, if you were a member of the communist institution, you couldn't be practitioner of any kind of religion, otherwise you could be segregated by the society. It was not until 1991 that we changed from being an atheist country to a secular one. But if I go with my necklaces and bracelets of Santeria to apply for a job in certain spaces, I'd be denied because we still have cultural prejudices related to these traditions. But nowadays, we are a community center. We have different kind of activities. For instance, on Sundays, we have rumba. You know rumba? Of course, Ricky Ricardo, remember, the most popular rumbero. Cuban rumbero in the 50s, and I Love Lucy, you know? But rumba, my friends, is described by Ned Sublet in his classical book, Cuba and Its Music, as the most rhythmically sophisticated non-sacred music here in Cuba. The African soul of Cuban music, a complex of drums, driving dances that includes Columbia, Jambu, and Guaguanco. But indeed, my friends, in my humble opinion, rumba was the disguise of the religious music, because the Africans and their descendants were not able to play the religious drums in public, and what they did, they created new kind of drums with things they had at hands, like crates of guava, like barrels of wine. And when the policemen raided their houses to confiscate religious drums, they didn't find religious drums, and it was able for them to maintain what they could from their past. Rumba, that has been declared as national heritage. Anyway, we had to wait more than 60 years after the revolution to declare rumba as a national heritage, because this music has been always regarded as the music of the marginalized people, you know? And then rumba has been declared as a world heritage. Rumba has influenced a lot our national music, even American music. Let's remember one of the Cuban rumberos, Shano Pozo, who introduced congas into Dizzy Gillespie band. And then on Saturdays, the first Saturday of the month in the morning, we have an activity for children. And in the afternoon, we have an activity with the LGBT plus African descendant community. We have here Cuban black drag queens. The second Saturday of the month, we have Cuban rap. The third Saturday of the month, we have Cuban reggae. And the last Friday of the month, we have traditional Cuban music. Indeed, my friends, this place is like a bridge for different Cuban cultural practices. At the same time, we do have social work with children. We will have workshops for them of giving theater, dancing, music, and some other things. And then we have a program of social inclusion where we work with people who had police record. But everything in this area, my friends, is inspired by the African-derived religion, inspired by the visual richness and the creativity from these traditions. Let's remember that during the Atlantic slave trade were brought here to Cuba, 0.3 million of Africa. That is official information. For some scholars, around 2 millions. And from 1523, 1873, official information. From Senegal until Angola, western coast of Africa, Saharian traditions. And immediately after they arrived at their destination, they were submitted to a brutal system of cultural change. They were forced to acquire a new language, to reshape their dressing, eating, and working habits, to rearrange their social and political organization, as well as their family structure, and to modify their religious belief. But it was not enough to take their memories away from them. Together with the process of transformation, there was one of cultural resistance, by which the Africans were able to retain what they could from their past. One of the reasons that we are still practicing in Cuba 4 religions with African roots. In Cuba, identified as religions at the same level of the historical religions. The most popular, everybody know about it? Remember, Sublime, the band Sublime? I don't practice Santeria, and Santeria is described by scholars as just a logical process of syncretism between Catholicism and African religion from Nigeria. But I totally disagree with that definition. Then we have Arara, that came from the old kingdom of Dahomey, today Benin. Did you see that film by Viola Davis, The Woman King? You know, from that area, the old kingdom of Dahomey, today Benin, we have a religion so-called Arara. Then we have Reglas de Palomonte from central part of Africa, Congo, Angola, and even Mozambique. And then we have the Secret Society Abagua. That's a male mutual aid society from southeastern Nigeria, southwestern Cameroon. But these religions, my friends, were forced to be mixed among them. At the same time, they were forced to be hidden behind different religions like Catholicism, that was the official religion of the island during the Spanish government after 1902. They were forced to share spaces with Protestant religions that were brought from the United States of America. And after 1959, behind the communist institutions, behind the ideas of Marx, Lenin, Raoul, one of the reasons that even today, and as a result of our entangled transculturations in Cuba, you can be Catholic, Protestant, practice Cuban religion with African roots, even communist and homosexual at the same time without any conflict. We are open-minded related to religion. One of the reasons that has been difficult to identify how many people practice one religion or the other. The most accurate information I have heard is that around 75% of our population, people practice what scholars identify as diffuse religiosity. Diffuse religiosity. That means, in a practical sense, Catholic in the morning, Protestant in the afternoon, and at night, just in case, something. And something important to know about this place is that Salvador Gonzales started in 1990, when it was almost prohibited to paint outdoor without political theme. At the same time, was 2 years before of the declaration of the free exercise of religion by the court. Remember in Cuba, after 1959, if you were a member of the communist institution, you couldn't be practitioner of any kind of religion, otherwise you could be segregated by the society. And then, most of the paintings here are related to Santeria. But what is Santeria? Tell me about it. He told me that you are experts in Santeria. Well, Santeria, first of all, is a practical weapon that we have in Cuba to solve problems. In Cuba, if you have love problems, money problems, health problems, problems with your mother-in-law, they send you to seek practitioners of Santeria. Santeria has its origin. Santeria is a field where marginalized people are legitimized. It's a field where black women found social recognition. And it's a field where the LGBT community found shelter when they were rejected by communism and Christianism. Indeed, my friends, Santeria has its origins amongst the Yoruba priests and priestesses of the Orishas, gods and goddesses, divinities from Nigeria, who were enslaved at the close of the 18th century and the first decades of the 19th century, both in slavery and later went free. The Yoruba in Cuba and their descendants maintained a number of African religious practices by developing complex parallelisms among the Yoruba ancestry, the other African traditions that have been brought to Cuba, the Latin version of the spiritualism, so-called Espiritismo, that is never mentioned but is important, and the Spanish folk Catholicism, that was the official religion of the island. That's why we have that name, Santeria. Remember that I told you that I disagree with that definition, that is just a logical process of syncretism, because it was not logical, because the Africans were forced of adopting symbols of Catholicism in order to be allowed to practice in public. They were forced of using the Catholic veil in order to have social mobility. And for some scholars, there is no syncretism. There is a great debate about it, that there is no syncretism, because syncretism is a philosophical doctrine where you have to conciliate two religions, but there is nothing to conciliate between African practices and of Catholicism. But we still have our mind colonized, and we still identify African deities behind Catholic saints. Every December 4th, Saint people in the morning go to Catholic churches to honor Saint Barbara. They send people that in the afternoon, they go to the house of the Santeria to play drums, dancing, drinking rum, and smoking cigar, dedicated to Shango, god of fire, thunder, music, and dancing. And even today, my friend, there are some houses of Santeria where you are not able to be initiated into this mystery without being baptized by a Catholic priest. I was studying to be a Catholic priest for 2 years. But I love women, impossible for me to do. But something important is that inside of the Catholic Church, I have to study about this popular religiosity. Indeed, Catholic authorities need to study about the popular religiosity with African roots in order to evangelize them. But it doesn't mean that Catholic authorities accept this religion. I remember 1998 when the Pope, Johannes Paulus II, the first Pope visiting Cuba, people who practice this religion wanted to welcome him with their music and dancing, but it was denied, that petition. But if people who practice this religion leave Catholic churches would be almost empty, because most of the people practice both religions at the same time. But anyway, in Santeria, my friend, as Yoruba tradition, but let me highlight something about this. This is not a Yoruba tradition. This is the reformation, the renovation, even the reinvention of the Yoruba culture in Cuba. But as Yoruba tradition, we do have ideas of destiny and reincarnation, a cosmology that places human beings at the center of a nexus of forces and a complex ritual system that consists of divination and sacrifice. Destiny, reincarnation, divination, and sacrifice, they are keywords into this culture. And then in Santeria, we do believe in a high God, in a supreme being. But this supreme being is different from Christian's supreme being or Islam's supreme being, because in this case, this supreme being shares functions with other divinities. He didn't create earth by his own. He used some other divinities, emanations from the supreme being, and even birds. A hand was used to create earth. That's why we solved the problem. Who came first? The egg or the hand? It was the hand that came down from the heaven. And then this supreme being is the wielder of the energy from the universe. That energy is so-called Ashe. Ashe. There is another Cuban expression, Ashe Pati. Ashe Pati means good luck. Ashe is the life force present in nature. Ashe is what Robert Farris Thompson, in his classical book, Flash of the Spirits, if you want to know more about this, Flash of the Spirits by Robert Farris Thompson, defines Santeria as a power to make things happen. And after Olofin created mankind, Earth, together with other divinities, he got retired and he left on Earth the Orishas. And Orisha, or Orishas, is the paramount of this religion. Orishas are natural forces, personal, spiritual beings that empower all life, aspects from nature. Orishas There are principles for understanding the world. Orishas is supposed that they have a domain on earth, physical manifestation, and psychological correlative in human minds. And orishas, the best definition I have heard is that orishas are frequencies of energies produced by the work of the natural forces working in natural environment. Orishas, ori means head. That's why in these paintings we find profiles, we find heads, you know. Ori, head. Sha, the divine essence of the inner self. That means, in a practical sense, that you have your own energy. That energy is in communion with one natural force. That is your God, your Orisha, that you have to be in balance in order to fulfill your destiny that has been given by the God Almighty, or just solving specific problems in a life, not with the life. And by speaking, feasting, and dancing with the Orishas, human beings are brought to worldly success and heavenly wisdom. As a human being, you have a vibration. That vibration produces a frequency of energy, and that frequency of energy is in balance with one frequency of energy produced by nature, and that is your personal Orisha. And you have to be in balance in order to have success in life, in order to fulfill your destiny. And then, what is being initiated into Santeria? That is a ceremony of 7 days, 7 days, biblical number, that you have to remain secluded in a specific room in a house of Santeria, confined for 7 days in a room, so-called Ibodu, that means spiritual grove, and indeed is a symbol of the vagina of a woman, because you have to commit an act of rebirth, you know. And for 7 days, Santeros and Santeras are going to prepare your ori, your head, to receive the energy, to be enthroned, to sit the energy of one specific natural force in your head, in your body. Do you practice Reiki? Any of you? Reiki? Similar to Reiki, but in the case of Reiki, they use the universal energy. In the case of Santeria, we use telluric energies, you know, close to the human beings. And then, after that, you become in Iyawo. That means bride or junior wife of the Orisha. And for a year and 7 days, you have to abide by different rules of behavior, different guidelines in order to be in balance, in harmony with your personal Orisha. One of them, you have seen in the street, people all dress up in white. Why in white color? Because white color is a symbol of life after death. Is the symbol of the spiritual world, the symbol of purification. And for a year and 7 days, you have to purify your body in order to be in balance with your personal Orisha. There are some other reasons. One of them, because of the ceremony of the Alpis Day, because in Christianism, in Catholicism, to receive the baptism, you have to dress up all in white. Another reason is because Islam, because of the Muslims, because these people, these African people, were influenced by Islam before coming to Cuba. And another, in the United States of America, you have the influence of these people. Remember, you have the nation of Islam, a lot of Afro-descendants, they are Muslims, but not in Cuba, because Islamized Africans were prohibited, banned, you know. But another reason is because is to remember that this religion came out from the slavery time. Because when the Africans were brought to the New World, they were working in the countryside as a beast of burden, dressing just a piece of cloth in white. But not just dress up in white, that's easy. You are not allowed to shake hands with these people. You are not able to handle any object from the hand of another person. You are not able to be photographed. That's important. You know, please don't take pictures of those people in the street or dress up in white. Of course, God forgive innocence. If you have taken a picture of those people, of course. But anyway, you are not able to eat on the table. You have to eat on the floor, mat on the floor. You are not able to leave your house after 6 p.m., no before 6 a.m. for 3 months. After three months until midnight. It was terrible to me because I am a party animal, you know, a year without party. And then at night, at night, you were not able to women are not able to wear makeup, you know. For Cuban women, that's a torture. You are not able to see the reflection of your face in front of a mirror, you know. And some other rules of behavior depending on your energy, depending on your personal ritual. You are not able to be wet by the raining. That's important. I didn't care about that. And the first time I was dressed up all in white, I went, it was raining, I was outside, and I got sick for a week. Now it's okay, no problem. Before, no problem. But in that period of time, I didn't care about that guideline, but it was terrible to me for a week. You are not able to be wet by the rain. I don't know why. But anyway, you are not, and in traditional houses of Santeria, long time ago, you were not able to have sexual relationship for 3 months. But we are very hot here in Cuba, impossible to abide by the rule. That's why they have to be more flexible. And Santeria is a flexible religion, non-centralized religion, non-institutionalized religion, non-proselytizing. We don't seek followers. You know, people go to the house of Santeria, try to solve their problems. We have not a dogma. We have not the conception of eternal salvation or eternal damnation. We have not the conception of sin. Man life has not end. It constitutes a cycle, and death is merely a transition in the process of change. But unlike the concept of reincarnation in Hinduism, in this case, you are not going to reincarnate in animals or plants. No, you are going to reincarnate in a specific group of spiritual family group. You know? And then we have not a holy book. This knowledge has been transmitted orally from generation to the next. Nowadays there are some booklets or some books written by practitioners, but they don't act as a holy book. They were not inspired by God, you know. And then Santeria is a practical knowledge. In Africa, in Nigeria, if you have anemia, have you been in Nigeria? Yeah, but if you are in Nigeria, if you have anemia, they send you to see a priest of Shango. Why for? Because Shango is a pure energy from the lightning, and the lightning produces on Earth nitrogen. Nitrogen is the base for amino acids. Amino acids is the base for proteins. If you have a problem, well, Shango is the one that's going to solve your problem. Go to the hospital, make some tests, and maybe you will have proteins. You will have problems with proteins. It's not by chance that every time you go to a consultation, people send you to see a medical doctor, because through observation, these people have realized how natural forces affect our physical and spiritual body. Like in Chinese tradition, in Japanese tradition, in Maori culture, Native Americans, Indians, and so on. But in this case, they are practical, that they use the natural forces to bring balance and solving problems. I have some friends that they have been using Santeria for more than 40 years, and they never have been initiated into this culture. I was initiated into this culture just years ago. He saw me all dressed up in white, but it was after 30 years studying about this thing. Anyway, I was initiated in Voodoo, I was initiated in the Reiki, I was initiated in different religions because I like religion in general. But to decide myself to be initiated into this culture, I had to study deeper. I have to go to undergo deeper into this knowledge, because he said lifelong commitment. Then, from any question so far, do I make myself clear? Because in Spanish it's difficult to explain, in English it's worse. Any question? Tell me any question you have so far.
The consultation in Santeria, does it use a binary like Ifa?
I'll go to that point.
Okay.
The first step into this religion is having a consultation, a kind of spiritual seeking, in order to know the spiritual source of your problem and the spiritual force that you need to invoke in order to achieve something. We have different interpretative predictive systems, because you don't know your richa, you don't know your problem, you don't know what is going to happen with you, you don't know what kind of magic work you have to do, and then we have different interpretative predictive systems. Remember that Santeria is the commercial name. The most accurate moniker for this religion is Regla de Ocha the path of the spirits, the path of the orishas, and regla de Ifa. What happened with this? Regla de Osha is the transformation or the pantheonization of all of the orishas that were brought from Nigeria. Remember that from Nigeria were brought here to Cuba. That is a symbolic number, is around 200 orishas, but most of the secrets were lost with the Africans. And nowadays we know the entire liturgy of around 10 to 20, 10 to 30 orishas, that we know the entire liturgy, you know? And they identify your personal orisha with the seashell. Merililogum, Merililogum. That is the oracle of the seashell. Have you seen the cowries?
Yes.
With the cowries, they have a consultation, and they divine. I don't like the word divine. They interpret your holy information. But that information that you have came from the heaven. Yeah? And then in my personal case, it was interesting because there is a fight between the oracle of the seashell and another oracle that I will tell you now. When I was, long time ago, 30 years ago, I wanted to know my personal orisha. You know, by curious, because I was very curious in that period of time. And in the oracle of the seashell, my personal orisha was Yemaya. You know Yemaya, the ocean. I love the ocean. And I thought that my orisha was Yemaya. But the problem is that at the close of the 19th century was introduced in Cuba another path of initiation, so-called the oracle of Ifa. That's why the most accurate moniker of this region is Regla de Osha Ifa, the combination of these two different religious systems. And then in the oracle of Ifa is what the scholars identify as, well, Ifa is a kind of geomancy. You know, geomancy is divination by figures or lines drawn on another surface or a substitute therefore. But it's identified as a digital oracle by a scholar. Why digital? Because they use the binary code, 0s and 1, before the computers, in order to identify the destiny of people. The readers of this oracle are so-called Babalao or Babalao. Baba means father, Awo mystery, the father of the secrets. In Cuba, no women. In Cuba, no homosexual, no gay, just heterosexual men. That is in Cuba. In Africa, women are able to read this oracle as Iyanifa, but they are not accepted in Cuba because we follow the pre-slave trade rule. And then, when I underwent, because in my house, in my family house, in my religious family house, they didn't accept me to identify my orisha through the Merilide Logum. And then I had to undergo to the ceremony of the Babalaos of the Oracle of Ifa, and in that oracle, my personal orisha was Obatala, the order of the heads of the human. But in Santeria, as the transformation of this region, besides your personal orisha, you are going to receive some other auxiliary orishas. That is a Cuban transformation. That's why you see a Cuban with a lot of necklaces with different colors. That is a Cuban transformation. You know, because your personal orisha, you are going to receive some other orisha. That's a result of the homogenization of this island. This tradition was as well transformed. And then, besides my personal orisha, I have a second orisha in charge and some other orishas, auxiliary orishas. And by orisha in Oracle of Ifa was Obatala, but in the cowrie shell, Yemaya. You know, my second in hand was Yemaya, but my personal one is Obatala. That's why my bracelet is all in white. Because it's Obatala. Obatala, that is one of the reasons that we are all dressed up all in white. Because it's to honor the first orisha who was created, that was Obatala, the one who was in charge of the creation of earth. Do I make myself clear?
Yes.
And then another very interesting theme. I don't want you to be boring. I have been 45 minutes. No. A very sensitive theme in Santeria is the animal sacrifice. But in Santeria, you sacrifice behavior, you sacrifice time, you sacrifice food, you sacrifice other things, and animals. Why animals? Because animals were part of the creation. They belong to the Supreme Being. And we see animals as a complement for humanity. Look at this. In Santeria, we don't believe that the spirit is going to reincarnate in animals. We reincarnate in specific family groups. They are energies. Animals are energies that they are a complement for humanity. And we prefer to sacrifice an animal to save a person, because in Santeria we do save people. Another reason is that the energy that is embodied in that animal is going to scale into into a higher spiritual level. Then another reason is that well, no, it's not the reason, but the slayers who are going to perform at the ceremony of the animal sacrifice, they undergo the ceremony when they receive the license to do so, and at the same time they minimize the suffering of the animal, and they receive a license to sacrifice an animal, because it's not everyone who is able to sacrifice an animal. And the meat during the ceremonies of the animal sacrifice, the meat is cooked and eaten in a ceremony when they gather the whole community and they present the new initiative. It's a time to share with your community, you know, because as much you give, you will receive. And I always remember during the 90s, when we faced one of the crises in Cuba after the demise of the Soviet Union, my brothers and I were always looking for houses of Santeria to eat meat and sweets for free. And the best homemade sweets in Cuba are prepared during the ceremonies of Santeria. Look at me. Okay, any question? If you want to know more about this, Santeria Enthroned by David H. Brown, or by Flash of the Spirits by Robert Fabrice Thompson, or a documentary by Marta Moreno Vega, When the Spirits Dance, or in Spanish, Cuando los Espíritus Bailan Mambo. Any question?
What do ancestral offer?
We need 3 hours. But anyway, in Santeria, besides the Orishas, we do pay homage to the Egu. That is the derivation of the word that they have in Nigeria, Egungun. You know? But in Cuba, that tradition was not brought. Egungun. And then we honor the spirits. In Santeria, you are not able to be initiated in Santeria without let the spirits know that you have to be initiated in this tradition. You have to honor first. In Mexico, they have the Day of the Dead. You know, once in a year. In Cuba, it's every day. In Cuba, we honor the spirits. Before being initiated, before any ceremony of Santeria, any ceremony about the Orishas, you have to mention your spirits. Not just your personal spirits, your family spirits. And it was taken by the revolution. That ceremony, that tradition, it was taken by communists, it was taken by Fidel. Because all the time, because before Fidel opened a political performance, they always mentioned the heroes before, that they died before the revolution. They will always mention Abel Santa Maria, they always mention Che Guevara, always mention Camilo Cienfuegos. But that tradition, some people said that came from the tradition of Santeria. There is a really interesting article about this by Ivor Miller, religious symbolism in political performance in Cuba. Remember, in 1959, when Fidel gave his first speech in Havana, a white dove landing on his shoulder for the 2 hours of his oration. For people who practice this religion, was a symbol that she was the chosen one. Prepared or not, because some people said that they were trained or they placed food on the shoulder, whatever. But it was part of the traditions of politicians using symbols of this religion to gain the favor of people who practice this culture. In Voodoo, Duvalier in Haiti did the same. And presidents in Cuba, like Machado, like Batista, they used symbols of this religion as well. Did I answer your question? Any other question?
Well, there are some articles. The article you referenced?
Religious symbolism in political performance in Cuba by Ivor Miller.
In 1965, in America,
1965.
Malena Karenga created a community holiday called Kwanzaa. Is it viewed in any way for acknowledgement in Cuba or Africa? It's not spiritual.
Let's remember that when the revolution triumph, no? Triumph, whatever. When the revolution started in Cuba, a lot of Afro-Americans came to Cuba at the beginning of the revolution because this was a land free of racism, you know? And it is a very complicated thing. I'm not a specialist, but I've read a lot about this. Among them, Charles Moore. Do you know about Charles Moore? Charles Moore. Among them, Charles Moore, who came to Cuba to see the paradise, to a racial paradise. But some of them felt betrayed, like Charles Moore, who wrote a book where he claimed that Fidel was a racist, you know, whatever. And because the method Fidel applied to get rid of racism, it was not the best. Because racism persisted in Cuba. And remember, the revolution was made by white people. Because even black people were accused at the beginning of the revolution to support Batista. And that's why some of the black people were excluded from the main positions during the revolution. And a lot of black people, a lot of Afro-Americans, I don't want to say black people because sometimes I got trouble, but anyway, in some of the African descendants from the United States of America came to Cuba. They were inspired of how we kept the heritage from Africa and went back to the United States of America and created those kind of movements. One of them is really interesting, was the movement created by Eugene Walter King, or Adefumbi, who came to Cuba in 1959. He was initiated in Santeria, but he got trouble with his godfathers in Cuba because they initiated white people and they used elements of Catholicism. And he went back to the United States of America. He created the first Yoruba temple in Harlem, but he moved to South Carolina, Shelton, South Carolina, and he created Oyotunji village. But Cuba has to be proud of it because we were the first step of some African descendants to create movement with African pride. You know? And then Adefumbi was one of them, and some others. Charles Moore. If you wanna know about Charles Moore, there is a really interesting book. His biography, El Pichon, because he was a Jamaican descendant. Okay. Any other question? Did I answer your question? No? Not yet. I have to continue. Okay. Any question? Any other question? In the United States of America, there is a movement of mommy water as well. Mommy water. Not from Cuba, but from Haiti, because these Caribbean islands have influenced the United States of America. Because remember, the Africans in the United States of America, they were all rooted. And one of the first encounters, some Afro-Americans, were Cuba, Brazil, and Haiti. And that movement that you mentioned is part of it. Okay, any other questions? No more questions? I like this group. Okay, now we are going to get inside the gallery of the artist. Then we go inside the house of the artist to see a shrine of Santeria, and then we'll walk around and then get out of here. Okay.